A company in the Fenway that's been a pioneer in reading for the visually impaired will be celebrating efforts in literacy. There'll be a special reading at the North End Library along with supporters on a mission in the Boston Marathon. To tell us about the efforts are two guests from the National Braille Press, the president, Brian MacDonald, and the vice president of development, Joe Quintanilla. Thank you both for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
I want to start with Brian because there's a long history here going, what, 1920s for this company?
Yeah, National Braille Press started in 1927 on St. Patrick's Day, so we just celebrated our 92nd year. And we've been in Boston the whole time, even though we're national.
Now, I'm roughly thinking, the 1920s, this is when it's become really a norm for all kids to go through at least the 8th grade, maybe high school. Does that have something to do with what you're doing at the press?
Well, we certainly focus on education today. We started out as a Braille newspaper, though. Our founder had graduated from Perkins and realized it was right after World War I ended, and he felt that blind people were never getting accurate information or on time, and so his goal was to make a newspaper for Boston that was in Braille.
Joe, when most of us sighted people, when we encounter Braille, a lot of us would say, oh my, that's cumbersome, it's complicated. But when you were a kid learning to read, what was it like for you?
So I had functional vision when I was younger, so I made, I think, the mistake of pushing Braille away because I didn't want to be blind, or I wanted to be able to be in the classroom and not be pulled out of class to be taught something different. But it was a mistake because I went through school being an auditory learner, and I can tell you there are plenty of textbooks that I was listening to on tape back then, and I fell asleep to. I haven't met anyone who's fallen asleep reading. And also it came to where I was at a deficit in being a writer. I wrote more like I spoke. And when you don't have Braille or you don't have the ability to read, you really don't have a great command of the writing language.
Yeah, I'm bring back to Brian here because, these days people hear, well, there's so many audiobooks, so why do we need something else? Answer that.
Well, I think it's important, as Joe was saying, that audio is passively learning and listening. And when you read with your fingers in Braille, you're actively engaging your brain to understand and decode that content. And so I think it's really important when you think of children learning and memorizing and studying that they actively engage better and actually learn better by using Braille as an active way of reading with their fingers.
Joe, of course, what also happens with literacy, it's not just about books anymore or audiobooks either. We're talking about computer literacy. Is there some dimension of that involves Braille too? Yeah,
we've met a lot of blind computer programmers who say they would not be able to be programmers and code if it wasn't for being able to have access to Braille. So they'll have what's called a Braille display, and what would be visible to you on your monitor is output in Braille on this display, and they're able to do that job. There's no way they would be able to memorize all this code or listen to it with screen reading software. So being able to read with their fingers would be the same thing that a sighted coder would be doing with their eyes.
Joe, when I read, I need a book because I need to look back at the sentence before this or something like that. I want to see how it's structured. Is that sort of like what you do when you read with Braille yourself?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that we hear a lot is that when you're reading with your fingers, you're interpreting what the author is doing on your own. It's not a narrator's voice. So you're really taking that into what you think your experience would be. In my personal experience in reading to my nephews, and reading, my wife is blind, and reading cards for our wedding together, a completely different experience than if someone were reading it to us. It was really more, I'd say more emotionally gratifying versus having someone read it to you or a narrator.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Brian MacDonald and Joe Quintanilla from the National Braille Press. Brian, speaking of reading, you have an event that's going to be happening at the North End Library. First of all, describe this. It is going to be a special kind of reading. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we've done them before, and we always try to do outreach in this capacity to get more of the general public to learn more about Braille and what Braille literacy means. And so we have an event where we sometimes will read a children's book, and one of our blind staff would read it with it's called a print Braille book, so it has clear Braille on top of the print pages of a traditional children's book. And so they can do that along with a sighted person, or the children could read along as the blind reader is reading it out loud. So it's fun, it's engaging, and it's very popular, so we're looking forward to doing one in the near future, right?
Joe, another effort here, you got people running in the Boston Marathon. What's that going to be like?
So it's a coveted opportunity to run the Boston Marathon, and we are fortunate to be part of the John Hancock nonprofit program. And we've got 2 people running the Boston Marathon, and one of them is from Texas. He cares about education. His mom was a transcriber, and that's putting Braille, print into Braille. So that's sort of his connection. And we have a local runner in the North End who's going to be part of this reading. Her name is Erin Connors, and she ran the Boston Marathon on our behalf in 2013, the year of the bombing. And when she got to Hereford Street is when the SWAT team had come out and just stopped everybody from continuing to do the race. So it's a pretty emotional experience, and we're very lucky to have her want to run this year, which would be 6 years to the day of the bombing, on our behalf. She's raised close to $13,000 for Braille literacy. She's not blind, but she cares about reading for everybody, and we're fortunate to have her be a part of our team.
And finally, Brian, if people want some more details about these events, you've got a website they can check out too?
Yeah, it's very simple. It's NBP for National Braille Press, nbp.org, and we have everything listed there.
Thank you both, Brian MacDonald and Joe Quintanilla.